Paul Chirico, and I'm the carpentry and construction teacher at Fluvanna County High School. We're located in rural Virginia, about 12 miles outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. We're in a logging community, a lot of lumber and things going on. I was asked to do this video by a guy up at Northcott Turning, and I believe they're in New Hampshire or Vermont, I can't remember which one, and he wanted me to talk about our timber framing club. Unfortunately, this year, due to the pandemic, we don't have a lot of activity with the club. I have a few kids who come in from time to time. But what we attempt to do every year is frame a structure. And it's kind of interesting how this whole program evolved and how we got to the point where we are. About 5-6 years ago, I took over the carpentry and construction program here at Fluvanna County High School. And there was no lumber in the place. There wasn't much of anything. And so I went out into the community and started to procure lumber from local dry kiln operators and stuff to kind of bridge the gap. And then we had a gentleman in the community who had a portable sawmill, and he volunteered to come in here and mill some lumber. So we got a local logger to donate some logs. He came in, and my boys and he milled about 5,000 feet of mixed hardwood species of lumber for our classes. We then proceeded to go outside and build a small air drying shed. We built a small solar-powered kiln that was designed by Virginia Tech, and we started drying our own lumber. A year later, we had a bunch of surplus equipment from an old school. So we sold that equipment, and we took the proceeds, and the school district here allowed us to go ahead and purchase our own portable sawmill. We bought a small Wood-Mizer LT-15 wide. We built a really nice building. The students did, not the school. The students built the building that houses the sawmill. And we put an expansion on it about 2 years ago. And we now have a really nice operation where we mill our own lumber. We dry our own lumber. We have an edger out there. We do all sorts of things. We have every kind of species you could think of. We have white oak, red oak, walnut, poplar, maple, cherry. We even have a little bit of ash. Through this evolution of what we've been doing, we would always end up with timbers because we were always cutting for grade. So I just started investigating, and I found a guy not too far away in Lexington, Virginia, named Greg Mullen. And Greg runs a timber framing club through VMI with his students, and he invited me up there. And I went up there for one of his builds, and he taught me quite a bit. And I came back here and started timber framing, and I teach it to my Carpentry 2 students. So every year now, for the past 4 years, my students pick a building, and then we go ahead and we frame it. Sometimes we sell it into the community, sometimes we sell it outside the community, and then we take the money, those proceeds, so that we can buy glue and screw and nails and things for our shop, for our Carpentry 1 students to build things with. The first thing we ever built was a Eastern Red Cedar pergola that's up at a local apple orchard down the road. The second year, we actually framed a tiny house on a trailer out of Eastern White Pine that came out really, really nice. We just built a picnic shelter for the teachers out behind the school. We built a small timber frame structure, like a small cabin for a local person up the road, and we just put it in his yard. Right now, I'm working with a couple students who come in from time to time on a building that was designed by Clark Bremer in Northern Lights Timber Framing. Really nice guy. I bought his program through the Timber Framing Guild, and I'm not quite computer savvy enough, and he was kind enough to go ahead and get me a working model with shop drawings and stuff, and I get to show this to Clark. See, it's worked out great, Clark. I mean, these things are the bomb, and anybody who doesn't have that program through SketchUp ought to get it. Once you get your model, it's pretty easy. So that's how we evolved, and that's what we do. As far as my students, at first, I thought this was really overwhelming. I thought my students would be overwhelmed by a lot of what's going on, and believe me, in the beginning they are. They're overwhelmed by the drawings, the visual spatial of where it is in the building, and I think this is really, really important. I got tons of kids who can sit down on AutoCAD and do all kinds of things, and manipulate and whatever. But then when asked, to actually design something or tell me how it goes together, they're really not sure, or why they're doing something, or why there's a reference edge. And so this thing has really taught them a lot, especially because the timbers aren't perfect. They're not starting with something perfect, and so they have to understand this whole idea of a reference point and everything being drawn from a reference. Once they get rolling, they're pretty good at it. I've got a lot of kids who I think they've gotten a lot out of it, a lot more than if I would have just had them build a bird feeder or a toolbox or a picnic table or something like that. How it fits together, cutting it, kind of like I use this analogy all the time with my students. I can teach you how to lay bricks, or you can carry bricks. Almost everybody can cut this, but can you lay it out? And do you understand, when laying it out, what you need to do? A lot of geometry and a lot of visual spatial skills going into doing this sort of thing, and it's very, very challenging. And I really do think they get a lot out of it, especially the group when we built the tiny house. That was pretty amazing when we built the tiny house on the trailer, because we had all kinds of constraints. We had height constraints, we had weight constraints. Were we going to use eastern white pine? Were we going to use southern yellow pine? We opted for eastern white pine because it's 30% lighter than southern yellow, and we also had to figure out whether or not we could actually timber frame it and have it come in under the gross vehicle weight of the trailer. So they had to calculate the sizes of all the timbers that were in the building, what their specific gravity was, how much it was going to weigh, and what we found out was that it wasn't a whole lot different in weight. In fact, it came in a little bit less than if it would have been like stick built with southern yellow pine, conventional framing on 16-inch centers. And it was a really, really long drawn out project, but it was well worth it. It's been a good experience, and I continue to do it. I love doing it. I think that's part of almost anything that anybody does. If somebody has a good program, usually there's a person who's really, really passionate about it, what they do, and they do it to the fullest degree, and that's what we do. The school district here has been unbelievably supportive to us. We have all the best tools that you could possibly want, and the community has been unbelievably, overwhelmingly supportive. These timbers right here that you're looking at are eastern white pine. They were donated by Tapscott Brothers Logging Company. I've had other companies that have donated logs to us. Real win-win here is that we mill all the sideboards off, we put them in our kiln and we dry them. Our Carpentry 1 students learn to build things and make things with that lumber. The timbers we take, and the Carpentry 2 students, they timber frame. And we've already talked a little bit about the program in terms of the timber framing aspect of it, but it would be hard to separate that from our sawmilling. So over the course of the last 4 or 5 years now, we built this initial structure, and then about 2 years later we added on an additional structure. But the timber framing aspect of it grew from the sawmill. The thing that's unique about this program that I think is really for people to understand is that this stuff is truly student generated. I may have designed this building, but initially my first kids who built this section that I'm sitting in right now, they dug every one of those post holes, however many of them that there are, with a hand post hole digger. Later on, when we got the addition, we went ahead and bought a little 2-man auger, which helped out, tremendously. But they rocked this thing up. The school year starts in August, and I believe that we were under this shelter, I think we were under this shelter in January, and we were starting to mill lumber. This is our mill right here. We bought this from Woodweiser. It's an LT15 wide. We've had tremendous success with this thing. It's manual, but the other thing that you have to understand is I have 15 students. So handling logs, rotating logs, and that sort of thing is not a big deal. Every one of my students operates this mill in some capacity or another. I have some students that really gravitate to the whole milling process. The kids that just want to load logs and spin logs. I teach them about how to grade a log, how to cut a log, how to box the heart. We've cut quite a bit of quarter-sawn white oak and how you would manipulate a log so that you can quarter-saw lumber on a horizontal mill. It's been great. We're trying to connect to the community. We're trying to connect our students to the community. We're trying to connect our students to the school. I have a lot of students who come back 2 years later, 3 years later after graduation, and they look up and they say, yeah, we built that, or we built that, or we did that, or we did that, or remember when we went up to Lexington and camped out, those sorts of things. The thing that we're teaching them is best practice and process.